Can you hear me
Edie.
now? Hi.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
Let me see if my video works now. There we go.
Yeah, we're all set.
I want to adjust that and make that a little closer
Sure.
here.
Sure.
So that you're not looking at all that stuff.
It's okay. Yeah.
Y'all ready?
Yeah, I think so.
You're very happy.
I'm happy. Yeah.
Let's see. So if I want to bring up a slide, how do I? Let's see. So first off, let's make this more full screen. I don't. So I don't see how to bring up a slide.
Okay. Let me see. If I make you a presenter, then maybe you'll have the option. Now check.
There you go. Okay.
I can see your screen.
And then you can see the screen, and you can see the model now.
Yeah. I can see the model on the performance enablement.
Okay. And then I stop sharing you. Go back to us. Okay.
Sure.
Great. Very good. Do we get any more registrants?
We got few more between yesterday and day before. Yeah.
I promoted it on social media too.
I saw that. Yeah, it was nice. The dry run.
Somebody said that they. Oh, I assume you're recording it and people can listen to it afterwards.
Absolutely. This session is being recorded.
Yeah. So, because one person who I've been talking to said she couldn't participate at this
No
time.
problem.
She's gonna listen
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we can do that.
Wonderful.
Jose, can you hear us? Okay.
Was that a yes?
I mean, if both of us can hear each other, it should be okay. But then just.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Sajan, sorry, there was some problem with my audio. I can hear you well. Yeah.
No problem. No problem. Thank you.
Wait a second. I went away from this and now I don't see us. I have to figure out how to get back.
You want to share your screen?
Yeah. Wrong button. Okay, let me turn. Got it. Well, there are a couple of eager beavers who are on here early, unless that's just us. It's probably just us. How many webinars do you guys do?
Recently, we have started doing one or two a month. And then we do two types, one live and then a few on demand. So we record it and then put it on YouTube and then promote it. So this week, I think we already did one last week, which was on demand. We recorded, put it on YouTube, then promoted to our subscribers and newsletter. And this is the second one. This is live. Yeah.
How long have you guys been kind of in business, really kind of live with your software?
So you're talking about clients, or you're talking about us as a company?
How long has the company
been in existence?
And when did you start rolling out to customers?
Right. So we started about 6 years ago. And then we're part of a larger group. So we immediately started acquiring customers. And then that's from India market. And then we expanded our operation to US, and now we are looking to launch in US. So those are the three that we actively promote. We promote our products and services in US, India, and Singapore, not necessarily in that order. Yeah. So we today we have about 180 customers and about 350,000 users. Yeah.
Do you find differences in what your customers needs and want from those locations?
We actually assumed that there will be a lot of differences, but when we actually talk to HR leaders, most of the challenges are almost the same. Like, for example, somebody is doing paper and pen performance management, and they want to move it to digital. They want to reduce the manual process. They want to create a positive workplace. Identify high potential employees. So at the end of it, it all comes down to right. Yeah. We started off in India, and we heard this digital and all that, and we thought when we go to Singapore, it will be entirely different. And Singapore, entire government, Chamber of Commerce, everybody is actually promoting about digital. And we come to US and we hear the same. So so that's good.
You specialize in companies that are kind of in the small to mid market.
Yeah. So so we have most of our customers are in that small and medium segment, so 50 to 500 employees. But we work with some of the large groups. For example, one of our customer who's into mining and natural resources, and they have about 20,000, 40,000, 20,000 employees across 40 countries. They do that. And then we have another company which has about 20, 25,000 employees across the globe. So we have both extremes. And then we have startups, with just 30 employees.
Right. Yeah. Very different experience.
Very different experience. Yeah. And even with the performance management process, it's very different in the sense that, some companies have a lot more approvals in their process. Some companies in the same geo, you will find companies who will have multiple approval process, and some company have a very straightforward, and some comes from top to bottom, some is bottom to top in terms of goal setting and all that. So we and our system is kind of flexible to accommodate all those.
Yeah.
All right. I think we are at the top of the hour. Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Synergita Talent Cast. We bring expert views, opinions, industry best practices, and practical tips for the HR community. Today we have a very special guest, Edie Goldberg. Edie Goldberg is the founder of E.L. Goldberg and Associates. She has specialized in human capital management and organization development for over 25 years. She focuses her practice on designing HR systems to attract, engage, develop, and retain employees. Thank you, Edie, for your time.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Same here. Edie, I want to start off by asking a question on creating competitive advantage, right? That's so important in where we are with the VUCA world and with uncertain future and all that. I want to start by asking, how can organizations create competitive advantage in today's world?
I think so much of what's happening, particularly today, right, kind of in our somewhat post-pandemic world, although it's not really post-pandemic, is the employee experience has become so central to what that competitive advantage is. So we're not here to talk about hybrid organizations, but obviously, you know, providing flexibility, but also, you know, providing that employee experience that truly engages the hearts and the minds of your employees, that makes their lives and their systems easier so that there's less friction in their system. Those types of things are very important. And, you know, one of the things that employees are always looking for are opportunities to learn and grow. Right? That's, you know, kind of our professional mantra is we start here, but we're always going somewhere. And that's really true regardless of how big your organization is or how junior or senior you are in your career. We all want to constantly kind of learn and grow our capabilities. So kind of creating a learning organization is one way to really create a competitive advantage within a company. So, and that becomes more important today because skills are hard to come by. We look at kind of today's labor market, right? There are over 11 million unfilled jobs out there, open jobs, and there are only about 5.6 million people unemployed, and those numbers are probably US-based numbers, and so there's a huge gap, right? We have all these open jobs and a mismatch of the number of people who are unemployed, but that actually doesn't tell the whole story, because a lot of those jobs that are available require skills that employees don't have. So creating competitive advantage is creating a learning organization so that you can internally grow the skills that your company needs to be successful, because chances are it's going to be very hard to get some of those particularly hot skills within your organization. So obviously the larger companies are attracting some of those hotter skills in the marketplace. But you know, for you to remain competitive, you're going to have to kind of find new ways to tap into that talent, and that's probably going to be growing your own skills.
Sure. So we've been just 1 minute, Edie. I mean, some of our participants have been saying that they are unable to see us. So let me see that. Now it's fine. Okay, great. Now it's fine, I think. Okay, all right, great. Sure. So let me jump to the second question, right? And then I think you have extensively written about the need to shift from performance management to performance enablement. Can you explain the difference to our audience?
Sure, and I'm gonna, just for a second here, I'm gonna bring up a visual for everybody. I'm gonna show my screen here. And can you see the model here?
Of course, yes.
Great, great. So this is what I refer to as a new model that I call performance enablement as opposed to performance management. Now, a couple years ago, a colleague of mine and I set out to write a new book chapter on performance management, and we're very evidence-based. So we wanted to make sure that our practices and our recommendations were based on what we knew to influence positive outcomes with the performance management process. And what we found out from that really kind of laid the foundation for our new thinking in this model. And so what you see is this model of performance enablement, which is really this virtuous cycle of positive energy kind of lifting up the organization. And if I think about kind of traditional performance management, that really is couched in, we're setting goals, get them, right? We set them at the beginning of the year, and then we kind of ignore them until the end of the year. So it tends to be a bit more of a static process. And then when we sit down and have that performance review conversation, we tend to be looking in the rear view mirror. We're talking about what happened during the year and kind of maybe trying to do a little bit of a, after action review of, what went well, what didn't go well. But that whole process is really focused on evaluating what you did in the past. This model is very focused on the future, right? So we set guidance and direction very early, helping employees understand what is the purpose and the meaning of your work. What is the company trying to do, and how are you part of that journey? Purpose and meaning is so important for employees. And then, collaboratively setting those goals with individuals so that, they have alignment across the organization. And we know from the research that setting goals, it is motivating, right? It influences individuals to, move forward towards that goal. And then we provide coaching, feedback, and support. I like to use the term feed forward versus feedback. And this is very forward looking. So rather than just having a feedback conversation that looks in the rearview mirror and talks about what you did, feed forward and that coaching element is more taking those past experiences and using them as a launching point for talking about what do we do moving forward that will help you be successful, achieve your goals, make progress on those goals. And then support is all around, removing obstacles and, getting employees the resources that they need to achieve their very best outcome. And then when we wrap that with development, I'm gonna take this off so you can see me rather than the model, but when we wrap that up with development, now we start to look at increasing capacity within the organization. So I believe that the purpose of performance management isn't to compensate individuals, because that's kind of the purpose that most of you use it for today. But the purpose of performance management is to increase individual and organizational performance. So my performance enablement model was really designed, and I have to give credit to my co-author on this, Alan Colquette. But that model was really designed to help us think about how we drive individual and organizational performance. And if we kind of include all of these elements, goal setting, that coaching and support and development that helps an individual continuously get better, improve, then we end up lifting the whole organization. And that's how you drive performance within the company. So it's a much more, your first question was, how do we create a competitive advantage? You create a competitive advantage with performance management by creating a process that really engages the employee and supports them, wraps them with support to help them achieve their wildest dreams. And that's what the model of performance enablement is really about.
Right. So, Edie, we spoke about goals and unlocking full potential of the employees and all. But if we just step back for a moment and just think about the role of performance management system in attracting and retaining talent, right? What are your views on that? How can really performance management system play a role in attracting and retaining talent?
So the research is really clear about what attracts and retains talent, right? It's about having challenging work, having opportunities to learn and grow. It's about career advancement, and it's about feeling valued for my contributions. So you think about performance management in the context of that, right? Challenging work. Well, the goal setting theory that we kind of base setting goals in is that you need to set stretch goals, challenging work, to motivate performance and to improve performance. And in fact, a research study that I recently conducted said those companies that set challenging goals were more likely to achieve their intended outcomes than companies that didn't set challenging goals. So challenge is really important in that element to stretch employees and that help them grow professionally. And then learning and growth, really important element. You know, I've done a lot of focus groups around performance management processes to really kind of diagnose what's happening today and how should it happen differently in a company. And inevitably, what I get told by employees and managers is, you know, we spend all this time on goal setting and all this time on feedback on, you know, kind of how we did last year, that when it gets to development planning, you know, not much attention is paid to it. Either we've run out of steam and time and we don't do it at all, which I see in a lot of systems, or you kind of set it and forget it, right? We set a development goal for the year, and then maybe at the end of the year, we ask an employee what they've achieved, but it's not really at the forefront of people's minds. But we know that learning and growth is so important to attracting and retaining talent. So we need to make development planning a central part of our performance management process, not an afterthought, but, you know, moving forward as a core part of that thesis. Now, there are a couple pieces of research, and again, you're going to see that I'm a little evidence-based here, that support that. So there was research, I believe, by John Boudreau that showed us that employees are more positive about their process if it's more focused in development. So that's one reason for doing it. But your leaders will be more convinced that research from I4CP showed us that companies that focused on development, that they set development plans and they followed through on them, were 2.5 times more likely to have better financial performance than companies that didn't focus on development. That's a really important outcome for everyone. So, so kind of creating that, what I said earlier, creating that learning organization, focusing on development is really important. And then the last piece around career advancement, of course, we advance our careers when we gain new capabilities. You know, for me, many companies have career management as a separate process from performance management, and that's fine as long as you have one. I also have worked with many companies where kind of part of the development conversation is also about career aspirations and how are we providing the right kind of workplace experiences that help an individual grow in a way that advances their career. So it really does kind of tick all those boxes.
Sure. But what do you see when you talk to your clients? What do you see when you talk to your customers or clients? Right? Have all the organizations moved to a continuous review, or they continue to stick for one-time annual review? Of course, there is going to be a lot of work. If they have to kind of design the process or for the first times, right? So what do you think about this, continuous review versus one-time annual review? Have the organizations moved on?
It's funny. Although Adobe Systems was not the first company to create a check-in process or a continuous review process, they certainly are a company that popularized that idea. And I think a lot of people have kind of grabbed onto that and thought, well, this is the best way to do it. And it certainly is catching on. But as I mentioned, so my colleague Alan Colquette and I did some research in support of this book chapter that we were writing, and we had about 113 really, really well-respected companies of all sizes. So from startups to huge, Fortune 100 companies and global companies. I know Tata in India was one of the companies that participated. And so we asked people, do you have a continuous process? What does that mean to you, et cetera? And we thought more people would be moving in that direction, but really only about a quarter of our participants said that their process was truly continuous. So we asked, do you have a continuous process, or do you have something that's a bit more kind of event or calendar driven? So 25% said that it was a continuous process. When you think about what is a continuous process, most people think about that in terms of the feedback element. But there's another element, it's the goal setting element, is also a question of, is it a continuous process? Is it a fixed annual process? Because I think historically, and this is part of our problem with performance management, is we set goals at the beginning of the year, and then we expect those goals to still be relevant at the end of the year.
Right.
And we've all lived through 2 years where things were changing pretty quickly, but even before the pandemic hit us, I would argue that our business context is constantly changing, and those biggest priorities that we have at the end of the year, what I mostly hear from leaders is, well, we just readjust goals at the end of the year because we found out that all those goals weren't really important. And when we sit down to do a performance review, we have to rewrite the goals. So it's kind of a funny process, but when we ask people, what's your goal setting process like? How continuous is that? 34% of companies said they still set annual goals, whereas 14% said that they set them at least 2 times a year. And so, about half the companies said we're doing it more frequently, whether more frequently is quarterly, monthly, or the ill-fated on an as-needed basis, which I'm not quite sure if that means we never do it or we do it a lot. There is a bit more frequency happening with setting goals. So there's feedback. Is feedback continuous? We're moving in that direction, but companies aren't totally there yet. And then goal setting, companies are realizing you can't kind of just set goals at the beginning of the year because goals provide focus and direction. And so we need to be reviewing and revising those goals as necessary to meet the needs of our business.
Sure. So Edie, when we talk about performance and performance management system, right? What do you think about aligning performance management system outcomes to compensation?
For me, people have heard me talk about this before. Have heard me say, it's the big elephant in the room, right? I say compensation is driving your performance management bus for the most part. They have kind of taken over the process, and it's really a process to distribute pay. So in our study, we asked these are CHROs, chief HR officers, people who are heads of talent management, or people who own the performance management process. And we asked, how is your performance management system designed? Kind of what are the key elements? And a majority of the participants said the main purpose of performance management in their company is to pay for performance. It's for compensation. But then interestingly, we asked, what should the purpose of your process be? And the majority of participants didn't say to pay for performance. They said that it was to drive and improve performance, to focus on feedback to improve performance. So how we've designed our systems is not necessarily how most professionals think our systems should be focused. So most of them are focused on this compensation issue, and we've designed them that way. However, there's a whole lot of research that says pay for performance doesn't actually work. First off, most of us are intrinsically motivated to do a great job. We're motivated by the task at hand and how much that interests us. We're not financially motivated, salespeople aside. We're not, it's not a carrot and stick issue for us. There's more, the importance of meaning in our work. So all, I have research from SHRM, I have research from Willis Towers Watson, my former employer, that in all the, big compensation firms out there, we do not have a lot of evidence that these pay for performance programs actually work. It all started with executive compensation. And then people thought, well, if we could pay executives based on their performance, we should do this for a broader part of our audience. And the reason executives are paid based on compensation has a lot to do with how the tax laws changed, and it was more advantageous for companies to make performance to make pay contingent on performance from a tax law perspective. And then that system just kind of permeated elsewhere. So we have this big, heavy process that makes us focus on pay for performance, but that isn't what works. So we need to rethink how to motivate individuals in ways that don't have to do with pay. And in fact, the research says that employees remember for far longer and are more moved by the words, by receiving recognition from your manager than pay. Pay, that money goes into my paycheck. I use it to pay bills. I may not be as directly motivated around that. I don't see it. But if a manager comes and maybe publicly recognizes me, or if I'm a very private individual, privately recognizes me for the work that I've done, that sticks with me. That drives me. So and I could go on about this for about an hour, and I have a huge portion of the book chapter I have coming up next year that is really going to focus on that. But we need to have compensation do their own thing, and we need to make sure that performance management, or as I call it, performance enablement, is focused on driving and improving individual and organizational performance, and pay doesn't do that. So disconnecting compensation as the sole driver of your process, I think, is something companies need to look at. We have to pay people for the work that they do, but I think it's one of those reasons why we set goals and then forget them, because people think, oh, well, if we set goals and we're going to evaluate people against their goals, we can't change those goals during the year because that's how people know they're going to get paid. They're going to get paid for performance against those goals. But then when it's all said and done, 12 months later, those goals actually weren't really important and we made people focus on other things. So we changed those goals. So it's a complicated system that I just don't think matches the speed and agility that we need in organizations today. And so having a more nimble system that isn't completely tied to compensation will actually help your organization improve more than if we take that traditional, let's, try and tie pay to performance, because it's just not a process that yields dividends. No pun intended.
Sure. Sure. So Edie, one of the common questions that we come across is, should organizations follow a very generic standard questionnaire, or should it be role specific? For example, a generic would be just quality, productivity, deliverability, accuracy, something like that. And compared to a role specific, we would have like, for example, a salesperson, how do I sell more? What kind of trainings do you need? What objections did you face? So what are your views on that? Should you have role specific, or should you have a generic questionnaire that can be, managed by employees across the board?
So it's a fascinating question, and I'm going to answer this. I'm an industrial organizational psychologist, so I'm going to kind of answer this half as an industrial psychologist and half as an organizational psychologist. There are different purposes. There's not one right way. It depends on what your organization is focused on. So I'll take the organizational psychologist perspective first. I have used performance management often as a lever to change the culture within an organization. So often I'm brought in to create a high-performing organization. And when we're doing that, we are setting a series of expectations, or what a company values, that will drive performance within our organization. Those kinds of systems, they focus on the what and the how of performance. So goal setting, super important in driving performance. So the what is those goals, which we do review and revise as needed. And then the how are those behaviors that are really important in kind of creating that high performance culture, or whatever kind of culture, sales oriented culture. If you're a company like Neiman Marcus, it's all about the customer. Whatever is your special sauce about the culture that you need to drive your organization's strategy. That is when a company has one unified process. But again, the what I'm focused on, what my goals are, those are very job specific. They are aligned with what the company is trying to achieve, but they're very role or function specific kinds of things. The how, however, is unified across the organization because we're all trying to move together in one direction. That's one approach, and that's a very common approach. For organizations that have invested the time and the effort in identifying what drives success in individual roles, then you would see them taking the more specific process and creating a performance management process that is specific to those roles. Are they sales roles? Are they engineering roles? Are they marketing roles, et cetera? Are they warehouse worker roles, et cetera? So, that's the industrial side of my hat that I wear. And if you work in a litigious environment, where, you know, having a legally defensible process, that's absolutely the direction that you are going to move. And we're going to tie those performance management processes to our job descriptions, and make sure that those are very specific within an organization. So they are for different purposes. They require different amounts of work. So if I'm doing the job specific, you have to have done the research around what drives performance in those individual roles. But if I'm just trying to shift or create, if you're a startup, if I'm trying to create a culture, we might have one more unified process that that kind of envelops the hearts and the minds of your employees. That's the how side, but the what side is always specific to your job. Did that answer your question?
Sure. Yeah. So when you talk about when you talk about these reviews and on the performance management, right? We hear about adoption of daily, weekly, monthly check-in. You kind of touched that, you know, a little earlier, but we want to talk a little bit about, you know, are you seeing organizations, you know, succeeding with pushing employees to adopt check-in daily, weekly, monthly?
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing more and more companies interested in that. Now, you know, the key is getting your mindset around a check-in is not
Right.
Most people get freaked out. Like, you want
Absolutely.
me to have, you know, quarterly or monthly or weekly check-ins? Like, you know, it takes me hours to prepare for a performance review, and I have at least an hour conversation. I can't do that, you know, every week, every month, every whatever. Check-ins are lighter, right? How are you doing? A check-in is literally, how are you doing? Is this the most important thing that we need to be focusing on right now? What's getting in the way of your success? What can I do to remove barriers to help you advance and make progress against your goals? That's what a check-in is. It's not a big, heavy, there's no review or evaluation in a check-in. It literally is, or there could be, I've observed something that I think is getting in the way of performance, or I've observed something that you're doing that I think is really going to ensure your success. So keep doing it. You know, commenting on positive behavior is so important to reinforcing that positive behavior. So check-ins are a light thing, and I'm definitely seeing more companies move in that direction. The big issue that I see is that managers just don't have the skills. They don't know what to do. So when you're creating your process, you have to provide the skills, a template, a way for managers to understand how to effectively do these check-ins. You know, most people think of the pandemic as something that was all horrible. I mean, it's certainly all the loss of life is absolutely devastating. But from an organizational perspective, there were some really good things, like leaders had to trust their employees, right? Because we all went home to do our jobs. And so they got to see that employees could do what they needed to do without so much supervision. That was a good thing. Another really great thing that happened is it forced managers to check in a lot more because they weren't seeing their employees. They didn't know what they were doing. And some research from a company called ServiceNow said that all those check-ins actually created a sense of belonging within the organization. You checked in with me, you saw that, you know, my cats were running wild across my, you know, on my shelves there, or my one cat who always wants to be in front of the video, or people's children were kind of getting in on the scene. And I didn't have to separate my work life from my personal life. And all of a sudden I became a whole person. And so a lot of these check-ins had the effect of what I call the silver lining of the pandemic, of creating the sense of belonging, of really getting to know people on a different way. And I think that was a huge benefit. And it's something that we need to carry forward and not forget, because that was a really, really positive outcome.
Right, right. And that brings a very important question, right? We spoke about check-ins and how managers need to do a better job with managing check-ins, right? So what do you think is the role of performance management system in employee engagement?
So really important, and there's a lot of great research around this. So from our friends at Gallup, they did some great research, which was disappointing in so many ways. So their research said 23%, only 23% of employees felt that their managers gave them meaningful feedback.
Whoa.
Only a quarter. So that is sad. That is very, very sad. But their research found out that those employees who said that they got meaningful feedback from their manager were 3.5 times more likely to be engaged at work. So very important connection between giving feedback, given meaningful feedback, and employee engagement. The reason why only 23% of employees said that they got that meaningful feedback is, in my research, we found that something like on the order of 73% of managers were viewed as being poor or fair at having the skill set to provide feedback. So your company, everybody who's watching, you need to do more in terms of enabling your managers to have those meaningful feedback conversations with their employees, because that deeply ties to employee engagement. But the thing that's kind of stopping us is we don't give that training to our managers to help them be successful in that area. So a very direct connection, and a really easy way to kind of shore that up if we focus on that.
Right. And that brings to another important question, right? How do you develop high potential employees?
There are so many ways, and there's some really, really great models out there about, kind of what high potential employees need. First off, they need experiences that grow their skills. So really thinking about what are the specific kinds of experiences people need so that they can develop into those future leaders that you want them to be. I'm also a very strong believer in using assessments to create kind of a baseline for, what kind of attributes, what kind of skills do these potential leaders have, and using those to help you build that development plan that I talked about before. But, we focus on high potential. How do we, what do we do for our high potential people? I think we need to focus on developing all of our employees in this era of, the great resignation, right? Everybody's leaving their job. You want to create the employee experience that keeps employees at your organization. And part of that really is about their opportunities to learn and grow. So yes, there are special resources that are provided to those high potential employees, whether it be an opportunity to go to an executive education course, or just that we are crafting their career and making sure that the moves that they make in their career are building the capabilities that they need to lead a larger group in the future. All employees need that kind of development. And that, I think, is really a secret sauce for a lot of companies.
Sure. And so, Edie, if you look at an enterprise, or if you look at an organization, there are a large number of systems in a workplace, right? Especially with the Industry 4.0 or work tech and HR tech. So how can HR provide seamless and enjoyable experience?
There are a lot of different systems out there that, everybody who is watching this can use, right? So there's the big HCMs, the big human capital management systems that have, all the integrated solutions. And, my issue with that is it's great because it's all in one and it appears it's much more seamless, but you kind of have to use their system. So they're going to impose what kind of performance management process you have based on how they built their tool. To create changes to those tools is quite costly. You have to get, a special person who's going to help you make those kinds of modifications, and it tends to be pretty expensive. I believe that what most companies have to do is they have to design the process that's right for your organization, and then find the software system that delivers what you need. So what is that seamless experience? There are a lot of, if you will, pinpoint solutions, whether it be for compensation, performance management, engagement, et cetera, out there. Most of them have what they call APIs, which connect different systems. So I think curating the systems that you need to drive your organization, that are right for your organization, and then pinning them together through these APIs. It's not always perfect. It doesn't always work. But the important thing is having some sort of single sign-on process. That is, I don't have to log out of the system and log into that system and log out of this system and log into that system. It's just seamless for the employees. I love it when there's like Teams or Microsoft plugin, right? So while I'm getting my mail, I can also pick in feedback that I'm getting from my mail and move it into my performance system. There are a lot of very cool technology toys, if you will, that different companies have, but it's about the system that's right for you, that what you're driving toward, making sure that you have a single sign-on process so that it's easy and seamless for your employees, because that's about the employee experience and we want that to be easy. But don't necessarily fall into the trap of, I have to buy this huge system and then use what they have as opposed to what I need for my company.
Right.
That's my perspective on that topic.
Sure. So, another important question that we are hearing, Edie, is currently teams are working remotely, right? And then to build that purpose-driven culture or to drive the organizations, how can companies communicate that vision effectively?
So most of us are working more virtually. Here I am sitting in my office talking to you. And I think actually there are a lot of really great opportunities. I think, the key word that I find myself and my colleagues using is intentionality. You have to be very intentional with how you connect with your employees. There's sort of this out of sight, out of mind. If we're not in the same room, I'm not connecting with you. And I think I'm starting to really see a lot of relationships break down within organizations because there isn't that kind of close connection. So being very intentional about how do we connect. I recall many months ago, I think it was probably, early on in the pandemic, Tracy Kehoe, who's the CHRO for, I believe it's Hewlett Packard Enterprises. It's one of the HP companies. talked about, wow, there was this whole new experience during the pandemic of, they used to have people on the executive team go out and do kind of a town hall meeting in a specific location, right? And so the leaders would get up there on the stage and they would talk and they would share the strategy of the company and where things are going. And maybe a few employees would ask questions because they're pretty intimidated being in person with that leader. What happened during the pandemic is we realized we have other tools to get at people. And we could do one town hall that simultaneously got at all of our employees at the same time. And then we could enable reactions so that people could react to what was saying, happy face, sad face, frustrated face, or we can use the chat. And it turned out that enabling chat really created more community, and it really enabled employees to ask those burning questions that they wanted to ask, but were too intimidated to ask in person. But when it was in a virtual environment, it almost opened up things more. Now, I've seen that go astray. So if I'm kind of anonymous, people are asking inappropriate pointed questions, but for the most part, people were asking questions that was on everybody's mind, but people would be too afraid to ask, in person. And it really gives the executives an opportunity to connect with people. So use, what we have learned in the past couple of years to your advantage of actually creating more connection, connecting employees more to the company's strategy, allowing your executives to be out there more and connecting with your employees. But I think the importance is we have to have more conversations and we have to be more deliberate and intentional, whether it be our check-ins that we're having or virtual town halls where we can connect, or, in our, one of the things that happens when we're working remotely in a team meeting, you and I get on here in WebEx and we just sit and we wait for the meeting to start. But if we were sitting side by side in the meeting room, we'd be having side chatter, right? We'd be talking about what to do this weekend, where'd you go, what are your plans for the summer? We'd be connecting interpersonally.
Right.
So when we're having these virtual meetings, I think you need to create that space for having that kind of connection, whether it be we're doing it in the chat, whether we're doing it live, whether we're doing a little go around of, what fun thing do you have planned for the summer? Or, what's a highlight from your weekend? Allowing people to connect on that personal basis, excuse me, is so important. And we've lost a lot of that. And we need to figure out how to build that back. So, I'm excited that many companies have come back to the office at least sometime, whether it's once a month or once a week. Many companies a lot more than that, and that's a whole different conversation about the appropriateness of our hybrid strategies. But creating, when people come together, it is about creating connection. It's about building those networks within our companies and helping people develop and reinforce those relationships that we have that help us get our work done.
Sure. Thank you, Edie. I think that really sets the context and helps the team to work on communicating the vision and kind of set an environment for everybody to build that bonding relationship with the employees and communicate the vision. I think at this point, we'll open it up for the Q&A and take questions from the registrants. So registrants can type question in the Q&A or chat, and then we'll take it from there.
I'm sure many of you join this session because you have burning questions about a process that you're about to create, or the process you just got through that you hated, and you want to know how to change it. So this is a great opportunity to ask those questions. And let's see.
Right. Yeah, sure. So we have a question from Kavin, and it's about employee engagement. What do you believe the obstacles to employee engagement are? You know, what in your view are the barriers to employee engagement?
I think the first thing is, understanding why I'm here and connecting to the purpose of the company and how my work fits into the greater whole. I think we often don't provide employees with enough context, and we owe them that, to give them the context about why what they do matters. And I don't care if you are, working in a fast food restaurant, serving the customers, which is kind of the core job. I think it's funny. Many years ago, they were looking at what was the most important job at Disneyland. And it turned out to be the street sweeper, because having a clean environment was really important to the experience of being in the amusement park. And B, that was the person that most guests went up to and asked questions or directions to places. So your most important roles in your company may not be very obvious, but helping connect employees to that purpose is really important. I mentioned development as being a really important part of employee engagement. That if you look at some of the Gallup research, it is, that connection with my manager and whether or not my manager is providing me with meaningful feedback really connects me to how engaged, how excited I am about what's happening within the organization. So there are a lot of pieces, I think, in the performance management process or the performance enablement process that really do drive employee engagement. And I think, setting goals, setting challenging goals that are specific, that are within my control, that I feel connected to, that I have collaboratively set with my manager, those things facilitate employee engagement. And then, since we're talking about performance management, and this is a software company that is supporting this webinar, it is about the employee experience and interacting with those tools. They have to be seamless. They have to be easy to use. They have to be low friction to, create an environment that helps me to be successful, that helps me to be all that I can be.
Right. True, Eddie. I think we can take one last question, and Eddie, you might have it on your screen. What should I do to make things right when employees aren't aligned with the organizational goals?
When employees aren't, what should I do to make things right where employees aren't aligned with organizational goals? Great question. First off, the important thing is to be communicating those organizational goals. Now, historically in performance management, we had this kind of cascading goal process. You set the goals at the top of the company, then the next level sets their goals, then the next level sets their goals that align with the higher level, et cetera, et cetera. Unfortunately, that takes like 3-4 months to do within an organization. And, by the time you get down lower in the organization, something up here is shifted. So I'm not a fan of goal cascading for that purpose. I am a fan of goal alignment. So
right.
Where a company shares the strategy and the key goals of the organization, and then individuals are encouraged to set their goals to align with those organizational goals. It's harder when we're doing cascading for people lower in the organization to really kind of see that connection to higher level goals. When we simply focus on alignment, it's easier to understand what I'm doing with a customer and how that might, connect to what the company's strategy is trying to do overall. So have that conversation with the employee. Why are they working on something that is not aligned? Do they think it's important, but the company doesn't think it's important? I think the fact that goals shift within an organization based on the changing nature of our strategy, based on our changing business environment, bringing employees along in that journey about what's changing in the business environment and why our goals need to shift is an important conversation that connects them to what's happening and ensures that their goals are aligned. So I'm not sure if that was a question around career goals or just performance goals, but I answered it from a performance perspective.
Sure. Thank you, Edie. I think with that, we have come to the end of this episode of Synergita Talent Cast. Until next time, take care and see you soon. Thank you, Edie, once again. It's always a pleasure. Bye-bye.